But here's the crazy part. When you see what these 5 Jefferson nickels have actually been valued at, your eyes might stay wide open. I'm holding 5 Jefferson nickels right now, but I'm exposing only 5 of the most valuable and ultra-rare coins collectors are hunting for. We're talking about coins connected to values of thousands and potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you have one of these, don't spend it. Coin collectors, check your collection right now and hurry up and contact me, because you may be holding a hidden fortune without even knowing it. Coin number 1. There's a moment every coin hunter dreams about. You pick up an ordinary-looking nickel, turn it under the light, and suddenly realize the date is from another era. But with this 1958 Jefferson nickel, there is something even more important than its age. The tiny details can tell you whether you are holding a normal circulated coin or an example that deserves a much closer look. So before this nickel disappears into a vending machine, a cash drawer, or somebody else's pocket, stop. Look at what you actually have. The first thing you need to understand is that a 1958 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark is a Philadelphia issue. PCGS records 88,000 regular strike 1958 nickels from Philadelphia. That is a relatively low mintage for the Jefferson series, but it does not mean every 1958 nickel is automatically rare or worth a fortune. In circulated grades, the coin is generally common. The real scarcity begins when you find exceptional preservation, especially high-grade examples with full steps. PCGS. And that distinction is exactly what makes this coin so interesting. Most people hear 1958 and immediately think old equals valuable. That's not how serious collectors think. They want to know what condition it's in, whether the strike is strong, whether the steps on Monticello are fully defined, whether the surfaces are original, and whether anything unusual happened during production. This detail changes everything. Think about what America looked like in 1958. The country was moving through a period of post-war economic adjustment, technological growth, and Cold War tension. The space race was accelerating, consumer culture was expanding, and the United States was heading toward the dramatic social and political changes of the 1960s. In the middle of all that, millions of tiny Jefferson nickels were being struck and released into everyday commerce. And that is where the story becomes personal. Your nickel wasn't originally meant to sit inside a display case. It was made to circulate. It could have paid for something small at a shop, traveled through a cash register, been carried in a worker's pocket, and eventually ended up forgotten in a jar. Every one of those journeys created opportunities for contact marks, scratches, dents, and wear. More than 6 decades later, the coins that survive with strong original surfaces become far more interesting to collectors. Now turn the coin toward you. On the obverse is the familiar portrait of Thomas Jefferson facing left. Around him are the inscriptions, "In God We Trust," and "Liberty," with the date 1958 positioned beneath the portrait. The design was created by Felix Schlag, whose Jefferson nickel design became one of the longest-running designs in American coinage. The portrait has a calm appearance, but don't let that fool you. Collectors examine the fields around Jefferson, the hair details, the lettering, and the date for signs of wear or damage. Flip it over, and you'll see the part of the coin that can create serious collector excitement. The reverse features Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, with E pluribus unum above it, and United States of America, 5 cents, and Monticello surrounding the building. The steps beneath Monticello are especially important. On high-grade Jefferson nickels, collectors often look for the full steps designation because complete, sharply defined steps can dramatically increase desirability. And now, don't just look, feel it. A standard Jefferson nickel weighs 5.00 grams, measures approximately 21.21 millimeters in diameter, and is about 1.95 millimeters thick. Its composition is 75% copper and 25% nickel, with a plain edge. Hold one between your fingers, and you can feel why the denomination became such a familiar piece of American commerce. It has enough weight to feel substantial, yet it is small enough to disappear easily into a pocket. That plain edge is worth checking too. Run your eyes around it without scratching the coin. You're not looking for something dramatic just because you want to find an error. You're looking for anything that appears genuinely inconsistent with a normal Jefferson nickel. Major mint errors can be valuable, but ordinary damage is much more common. A damaged edge isn't automatically a rare discovery. Now let's talk about the surface you described as fine condition. If your 1958 nickel has an aged, darker, or slightly spotted appearance, resist the temptation to improve it. Never clean the coin. No polishing cloth. No vinegar. No baking soda. No metal cleaner. No rubbing. A collector can forgive honest age and circulation. Artificially damaged surfaces are another story entirely. Original toning matters because the surface is part of the coin's history. A natural gray, golden, or darker appearance can develop over decades, while harsh cleaning can create bright, unnatural surfaces covered with fine scratches. If you see black spots, don't immediately assume they are valuable toning either. They could be environmental staining, corrosion, or other damage. The important thing is to preserve the coin exactly as you found it until someone qualified can evaluate it. Here's where the ugly coin trap catches people. A collector may ignore a dirty old nickel because it doesn't look impressive. But another collector may notice something hidden beneath the ordinary appearance. A strong strike, unusually sharp Monticello steps, original surfaces, or a genuine die variety. You don't want to destroy the evidence before discovering what it is. So what should you check first? Start with the date, 1958, then confirm there is no mint mark beneath Monticello. For this Philadelphia issue, the absence of a mint mark is normal, not an error by itself. That is important because online videos sometimes make no mint mark sound automatically rare. It isn't. On a Philadelphia 1958 nickel, no mint mark is exactly what you should expect. Then move straight to Monticello. Look at the steps. Are the individual lines clearly separated? Are they worn smooth? Is there dirt hiding the details? Or are there unusually sharp, uninterrupted steps? This is one of the areas where serious Jefferson nickel collectors become obsessive. Identifies full steps as a major factor in the rarity of high-grade 1958 nickels. And here's something fascinating. PCGS reports an auction record of $13,513 for a 1958 Jefferson nickel graded MS66 Plus full steps sold in December 2019. That's a completely different situation from an ordinary circulated nickel. The huge difference demonstrates why condition and strike quality matter so much. So when you tell me your supplied market figure of $88,000, we need to be careful. That is not a realistic blanket value for every circulated 1958 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel. The documented PCGS auction record for the regular strike full steps example is far lower at $13,513. PCGS If your video uses the $88,000 figure as a claimed market value, make clear that it would require an exceptional, authenticated example or a specific rarity, not an ordinary fine-condition coin. But that doesn't make your nickel boring. Quite the opposite. It gives you a reason to inspect it properly. Imagine placing two 1,958 nickels under a lamp. The first is heavily worn, scratched, and dull. The second has unusually crisp lettering, strong Jefferson details, and clearly separated Monticello steps. They are technically the same denomination and year, but a serious collector sees two completely different opportunities. That is why professional grading is critical when you think you've found something exceptional. A grading service can authenticate the coin, evaluate its condition, and determine whether it qualifies for designations such as full steps. Without authentication, online claims about enormous values can quickly become misleading. And don't make the mistake of assuming that because a coin has black spots, darkness, or dirt, it must be rare. Surface appearance alone doesn't establish rarity. What matters is the combination of date, mint, grade, strike, variety, error status, and market demand. The production process itself can create tiny differences that collectors notice. Coins were struck under enormous pressure between dies. Over time, dies can wear, and individual strikes can vary in sharpness. But there's a huge difference between ordinary die wear and a recognized collectible variety. That's why you should never scratch or alter the coin in an attempt to reveal something. Collectors are particularly interested in pieces that preserve the details others lost through circulation. That's why high-grade 1,958 Jefferson nickels can command serious attention. PCGS estimates around 13.75 million surviving examples across all grades, while its survival estimate for MS60 or better is about 125,000 PCGS. The numbers show something important. The coin isn't generally rare in circulated condition, but exceptional preservation becomes a much smaller category. And then there is full steps. Those steps beneath Monticello can become almost an obsession. When circulation rubs across the reverse, the steps are among the details that can disappear. When a coin is struck sharply and preserved carefully, those steps can remain dramatically defined. That's exactly what collectors chase. So if you're holding a 1,958 nickel right now, tilt it slowly under a bright light. Don't touch the fields. Don't rub the surfaces. Just rotate it. Watch the light move across Jefferson's portrait. Then flip it over and look at Monticello. Count what you can actually see in the steps. Look at the lettering. Examine the surfaces for scratches and contact marks. Most people miss this because they're looking for a magical mint mark. But with this coin, the absence of a mint mark is normal. The real question is what condition and strike quality are hiding behind that date. And this is where patience can create opportunity. If you're unsure what you have, put the coin aside safely. Don't spend it. Don't clean it. Don't sell it to the first person who tells you it's worthless or the first person who promises you an unbelievable fortune. Get multiple opinions when necessary and rely on documented auction records and professional authentication. At an auction, genuinely exceptional Jefferson nickels can create intense competition. A high-grade full steps example can attract collectors who have been waiting for years for the right coin. When one appears, bidders aren't thinking about 5 cents. They're thinking about rarity, condition, registry competition, and whether another opportunity will appear soon. That's how a tiny piece of metal can become a silent fortune. But let's bring this back to your coin. You said it's a 1958 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel in fine condition. If that's accurate, it should not be presented as a guaranteed 5-figure or 6-figure coin simply because of the date. The standard issue is relatively common in circulated grades. The exciting possibility comes from discovering something beyond the normal issue, an unusual variety, a genuine error, or an exceptionally preserved example. And if it really is only fine condition, that's okay. You still have an important piece of American history. The coin has survived more than 60 years of circulation, and that alone makes it worth examining rather than casually spending. So here's your collector checklist. Confirm 1958. Confirm the Philadelphia no mint mark status. Inspect Jefferson's portrait. Study the lettering. Flip the coin and examine Monticello. Look closely at the steps. Check for genuine abnormalities, but don't confuse damage with an error. Inspect the edge without altering it. And above everything else, preserve the original surface. If your coin has dark spots, leave them alone until you know what they are. Original toning matters. Never clean the coin. Do not spend this coin until you've finished checking it. If the details look unusually sharp or something appears genuinely wrong with the normal design, professional grading is critical. This is not fiction, but the real treasure is in knowing the difference between an ordinary old nickel and a truly exceptional one. The 1958 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel has one of the lower mintages in its series, yet circulated examples are still generally common. The serious collector excitement begins when condition and strike quality separate an ordinary example from an extraordinary one. PCGS. And now, imagine you discover those steps are far sharper than you expected. Imagine the surfaces are original. Imagine the coin has survived decades without being cleaned. Suddenly, you aren't looking at 5 cents anymore. You're looking at a coin that deserves professional attention. That's the hidden wealth angle nobody should ignore. Not because every 1958 nickel is secretly worth a fortune, but because the right combination of characteristics can transform the value of an otherwise ordinary-looking coin. So put that nickel somewhere safe. Keep it away from chemicals, pockets full of keys and loose change. Hold it by the edges. Photograph both sides if needed. And if you think you've found an exceptional example, get it professionally evaluated before making a decision. Because the next coin in this hunt is where things become even more interesting. You thought this 1958 Philadelphia nickel was the one to watch. Wait until you see what comes next. The next coin has a detail that collectors can spot almost instantly, and if yours has it, you are going to want to stop everything before that coin ever reaches a cash register. Next up, coin number 2. What if the ugliest nickel in your pocket is the one you should have stopped and examined? Today, we're hunting a 1940 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark, and this ordinary-looking piece can become a collector's dream when the right details appear. Check your change before it disappears, because people are spending these coins without a second thought. Do not spend this coin. Stay with me, because the tiny details are where the real story begins. There is something almost unsettling about an old coin that looks completely ordinary. No flashy color, no obvious error, no spectacular appearance, just a worn Jefferson nickel sitting quietly among everyday change. And that is exactly why this 1940 Jefferson nickel deserves your attention. If one turns up in your collection, don't dismiss it because of its age, dirt, or dark surface. Turn it over. Look closer. Because with old coins, the smallest detail can completely change the conversation. The first thing you should notice is the date, 1940th. This coin belongs to the early years of the Jefferson nickel series, which began in 1938 after the Buffalo nickel was replaced. America was moving through a period of enormous economic and social change, and the country was approaching the uncertainty of the Second World War. Coins from this era carry more than a date. They represent a moment when American manufacturing, commerce, and everyday life were about to change dramatically. And here is where this particular nickel gets interesting. A 1940 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. That missing letter is not automatically an error. In this period, Philadelphia coins normally carried no mint mark, while coins from Denver and San Francisco were identified with their respective mint marks. So if you see a 1940 nickel without a mint mark, don't immediately assume something is wrong. In fact, that absence is part of what identifies where the coin was made. Now look at Jefferson himself. On the obverse, you'll see a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson. Around him are the words, "In God we trust," while the date 1940 appears below. The lettering and portrait are unmistakably part of Felix Schlag's famous Jefferson nickel design. But don't just glance at Jefferson's face. Slow down. Look around the date, the lettering, the rim, and the fields. Collectors examine these areas carefully because wear, damage, unusual marks, and genuine minting characteristics can tell a very different story from ordinary circulation damage. Flip the coin over, and the reverse takes you somewhere completely different. Standing proudly in the center is Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home. Above it is E pluribus unum, while United States of America, 5 cents, and Monticello surround the building. And beneath Monticello are the inscriptions identifying the building and its historical connection to Jefferson. This reverse is one of the reasons Jefferson nickels are so recognizable. But on a heavily circulated example, many of those details can become weak, flattened, or partially obscured. Now feel the coin in your hand. A standard Jefferson nickel from this era weighs about 5 grams. Its diameter is approximately 21.2 millimeters, with a thickness of roughly 1.95 millimeters. If you want to think about its girth as the circumference around the edge, you're looking at approximately 66.6 millimeters. Those measurements matter because a coin that looks right but has an unusual weight or physical dimension deserves closer examination. A basic digital scale and caliper can sometimes tell you more than your eyes can. And the metal itself is important. A normal 1940 Jefferson nickel is made from a copper-nickel alloy, rather than the wartime silver-containing composition that would appear later during World War II. That distinction is important when you're comparing early Jefferson nickels with the famous wartime nickels of 1942 through 1945. The coin should have the familiar solid feel of a 5-cent piece, and its edge should look normal for the series. But now comes the part that can fool almost anybody, the condition. You describe this example as having a black, shed-like, or darkened surface and poor condition. Most people would look at that and immediately say, it's just an old nickel. A serious collector may react differently. Dark toning, accumulated dirt, surface oxidation, or environmental staining can make a coin look unattractive, but the appearance alone does not tell you whether something important is underneath. This is why you should never grab a cleaning product and start rubbing. Do not clean this coin. Don't polish it. Don't use vinegar. Don't use baking soda. Don't use metal cleaner. Don't scratch the surface trying to reveal the date. Original toning and original surfaces can matter enormously to collectors, and aggressive cleaning can permanently damage the microscopic surface of the coin. Once those surfaces are scratched or chemically altered, you cannot simply put them back. Instead, hold the coin by its edges and use good lighting. Look at the date first. Then inspect the mint mark area, or in this case, confirm that there really is no mint mark. After that, study Jefferson's portrait and the reverse lettering. You're looking for details that appear naturally struck rather than marks that were created after the coin left the mint. And here's something most casual collectors miss. Not every unusual-looking mark is an error. A scratch can look like a die crack. A dent can look like a striking problem. Dirt can make lettering appear distorted. Damage from circulation can create strange shapes around the date or rim. That's why professional examination matters. If something truly unusual appears, don't guess. Photograph it, weigh it, protect it, and consider having it examined by a reputable coin professional or grading service. Now imagine this nickel sitting inside a drawer for decades. Nobody cared about it. Someone received it as change. Someone else spent it at a shop. It traveled through pockets, tills, jars, and cash registers. Eventually, it ended up forgotten. That's the fascinating part of old circulating coins. Their journey can be almost impossible to reconstruct. Millions of ordinary coins were produced during the Jefferson nickel era, but the coins that survive today, in attractive, original, problem-free condition, can become increasingly interesting to collectors. Every generation loses coins, damages coins, cleans coins, melts or discards old collections, or simply forgets where they put them. That's where supply and demand begin to matter. A collector isn't necessarily searching for just an old nickel. They're looking for the right combination of date, mint, strike, surface, preservation, and authenticity. A coin can be old and still be common. Another coin can be common in date but unusually desirable because of exceptional preservation or a documented variety or error. And that distinction is absolutely critical with this 1940 nickel. If you are looking at a heavily worn example, don't automatically assume that the coin is worth a fortune simply because it says 1940th. The market value of coins depends heavily on authentication, condition, rarity, and actual comparable sales. That's why the biggest numbers you see online should never be accepted blindly. For this video, the figure you've supplied is $751,000, and that is the dramatic figure attached to the coin in your presentation. But a serious collector would want documentation before treating that number as the confirmed value of an ordinary 1940 Philadelphia nickel. A genuine auction result, grading information, and an explanation of exactly what makes the specimen exceptional would be essential. That doesn't make the coin boring. It makes the hunt more exciting. Because now, you're not simply asking, is this nickel old? You're asking, what exactly am I holding? Imagine taking that dark, worn nickel and placing it under proper lighting. Suddenly, the date becomes clearer. The lettering begins to tell its story. You check the weight. You inspect the edge. You compare the surfaces. Then you notice something that you didn't see when you first picked it up. This detail changes everything. Collectors can become intensely competitive when a genuinely scarce, authenticated specimen appears. They may watch an auction quietly, waiting for the right moment. Then another bidder enters. Then another. The price rises. The room gets tense. Nobody wants to be the person who walked away from the coin that everyone else recognized. That's what creates the emotional side of collecting. It's not simply about metal. It's about ownership. It's about history. It's about finding something that thousands of people ignored before you noticed it. And if a coin has an attractive original surface, strong details, and a genuinely scarce characteristic, collectors may choose to hold rather than sell. When fewer desirable examples are available, competition can become stronger. But remember something extremely important. Poor condition does not automatically create rarity. In fact, condition can dramatically reduce value. A heavily worn 1940 nickel with dark spots may simply be a circulated coin, unless there is another legitimate characteristic that makes it special. So here's your first collector move. Don't destroy the evidence. Put the coin somewhere safe. Use a soft, non-abrasive holder or suitable archival storage. Keep it away from moisture and unnecessary handling. Don't scrape the black spots. Don't try to make the coin shine. And don't let someone casually tell you it's just 5 cents before you've actually checked it. Because patience is one of the most underrated advantages in coin collecting. People rush. They clean. They polish. They sell too quickly. They throw coins into jars where they bang against each other. And then, years later, they discover that the original condition mattered more than they realized. Professional grading can be critical when a coin appears genuinely scarce or valuable. A reputable grading service can authenticate the coin, evaluate its condition, and provide a professional assessment that gives potential buyers much more confidence. For a supposed high-value specimen, independent verification is not optional. It is part of the story. And if someone tells you that your 1940 nickel is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, don't celebrate before verification. Ask the important questions. What auctions sold it? What was the exact coin? What was the grade? Was it an error? Was it a rare variety? Was it a unique condition, rarity? Is there a documented sale? Those questions protect you from both undervaluing a treasure and overestimating an ordinary coin. Still, there's something incredibly powerful about this particular piece. A 1940 Jefferson nickel is nearly a time capsule. It was struck before the famous wartime silver alloy nickels. It carries Thomas Jefferson on one side and Monticello on the other. It weighs about 5 grams. It measures just over 21 millimeters across. And despite its tiny size, it connects directly to an America standing on the edge of one of the most turbulent periods of the 20th century. Think about that the next time you see one. Someone could have spent this coin decades ago without thinking twice. Someone could have cleaned it. Someone could have thrown it into a drawer. Someone could have ignored the missing mint mark. And someone could have looked directly at it without realizing they were holding a piece of American history. This is not fiction. But the real lesson isn't to believe every giant price tag you see online. The real lesson is to learn how to recognize when a coin deserves a second look. If you find a 1940 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark, check the date, inspect the surfaces, verify the weight, examine both sides, and look carefully for legitimate varieties or minting characteristics. Don't confuse damage with rarity. Don't clean it. And if something truly unusual appears, get professional help before making any decision. Because sometimes the difference between an ordinary 5-cent coin and a serious collector piece isn't something you can see from across the room. It's microscopic. It's hidden in the strike. It's hidden in the surface. It's hidden in the tiny details that almost everyone ignores. And that's why you should never judge an old nickel in 3 seconds. Do not spend this coin until you've checked it properly. Keep your eyes open, because the next Jefferson nickel is even more dangerous to overlook. It has a different date, a different story, and a detail that could make collectors stop scrolling instantly. What comes next could be the coin you would regret spending the most. Next up, coin number 3. Imagine finding a nickel that has survived more than 8 decades, still showing strong details, still carrying its original character, and still looking far better than the worn coins usually pulled from old jars. That is where this 1940 Jefferson nickel gets interesting. You're looking at the Philadelphia issue with no mint mark, described here as extra fine condition. But before you believe any giant price tag, there is one thing you need to understand. The real value of this coin lives in its exact grade, originality, strike, and authentication. The year 1940 puts this nickel in a fascinating moment of American history. The Jefferson nickel series had only begun in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and the country was moving toward the enormous economic and industrial changes that would accompany World War II. In 1940, the United States had not yet entered the war, but factories, transportation, manufacturing, and national priorities were already changing. A small 5-cent coin from this period can therefore carry a remarkable connection to a nation standing on the edge of transformation. And here's the detail that makes collectors stop for a second. There is no mint mark. That doesn't mean the coin is defective. It means Philadelphia struck it. The 1940 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel was intentionally produced without a mint mark, while Denver and San Francisco issues carried their respective letters. So when you're holding this coin, don't waste time searching for a missing letter that was never supposed to be there. The absence itself is part of the coin's identity. Now bring the coin closer. On the obverse, Thomas Jefferson faces left, surrounded by the inscriptions, "In God We Trust," and the date 1940th. The portrait was designed by Felix Schlag, whose Jefferson design became one of the most recognizable images on American coinage. On an extra fine example, you want the major portrait features to remain clearly visible, with noticeable detail surviving in Jefferson's hair, cheek, coat, and surrounding lettering. Those details tell you that the coin has experienced circulation, but not the extreme wear you'd expect from a heavily used example. Turn it over, and the scene changes completely. The reverse presents Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, sitting prominently in the center. Above it is E Pluribus Unum. Around the building are United States of America, 5 cents, and Monticello. On a stronger example, the building's architectural details can remain surprisingly clear, and collectors become especially interested in the steps beneath Monticello, because the sharpness of those steps can become a major factor in high-grade Jefferson nickel collecting. Now let's talk about what you're actually holding. A standard 1940 Jefferson nickel weighs approximately 5.00 grams, measures about 21.20 millimeters across, and is roughly 1.95 millimeters thick. Its plain edge gives it an approximate edge circumference or girth of about 66.6 millimeters. These numbers aren't just trivia. If you suspect you've found something unusual, weighing and measuring the coin can be an excellent first screening step. The composition is equally important. This 1940 Philadelphia nickel belongs to the pre-war composition, containing approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel. It is not one of the famous wartime silver alloy nickels produced later. That distinction matters because the mint changed the composition during World War II to conserve nickel, and the wartime coins carried unusually large mint marks above Monticello. Your 1940 Philadelphia example belongs to the earlier pre-war format. USA coin book. But here's where the story becomes more interesting than simply saying it's an old nickel. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 176,485,000 Jefferson nickels in 1940. That's a huge production number. So the date itself does not make every 1940 nickel rare. In fact, professional references describe the regular 1940 issue as common across many grades. That means the real hunt is for the exceptional characteristics, unusually strong preservation, remarkable strike quality, full steps, proof or special varieties, or another legitimate feature that separates one specimen from millions of ordinary examples. And that is exactly why your extra fine example needs to be handled carefully. Extra fine means the coin has experienced circulation, but important design detail remains. You should expect some friction on the highest portions of Jefferson's portrait and the reverse design. The coin won't have the untouched surfaces of a mint state piece, but it can still be attractive. What matters is whether the wear is natural and whether the surfaces remain original. If your coin has dark toning, brownish areas, black spots, or an old-looking surface, don't panic. And definitely don't start cleaning it. Never clean this coin. Not with soap. Not with vinegar. Not with baking soda. Not with jewelry polish. Not with a cloth designed to make metal shine. The surface of a coin contains microscopic information that can be destroyed by aggressive cleaning. A coin that looks darker today may actually be more desirable in its original state than after someone tries to make it look brand new. Original toning matters. Original surfaces matter. And once they're damaged, you cannot simply reverse the process. Now look at the date 1940 again. Don't just check whether the numbers exist. Examine their shape, spacing, and relationship to the surrounding field. Then study the lettering. Look for anything that appears genuinely part of the strike rather than a scratch or impact. After that, examine Monticello. Are the columns strong? Are the steps visible? Is the surface smooth or covered with marks? This is where collectors can spend hours. One tiny feature can separate an ordinary coin from a much more interesting one. But there's a trap here, and I want you to avoid it. Damage is not automatically rarity. A black line isn't automatically a die crack. A strange bump isn't automatically a mint error. A missing piece of lettering might simply be wear. A scratch across Jefferson's portrait happened after the coin left the mint. A dent on the edge isn't necessarily a striking mistake. The goal is not to convince yourself that every strange-looking coin is worth a fortune. The goal is to identify the evidence. And that is what makes professional grading so important when the stakes become serious. If you genuinely believe you have an exceptional 1940 nickel, protect it and have it evaluated by a reputable professional or major grading service. Authentication becomes especially important if someone claims the coin is worth an extraordinary amount. Now let's address the $471,000 figure supplied for this video. That is the value you're asking me to use as the claimed market figure, but it should not be presented as the verified value of an ordinary extra fine 1940 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel. Current reference data show ordinary circulated 1940 examples at much lower values, while documented high-grade examples can bring substantially more. PCGS records, for example, show a 1940 MS68 sale at $558, while exceptional full steps examples have reached several $1,000s. So if somebody tells you your extra fine 1,940 nickel is automatically worth $471,000, stop and ask for proof. What exact coin sold for that amount? What grade was it? Was it a rare variety? Was it a mint error? Was it a proof? Was it an extraordinary full steps example? Which auction house sold it? Without those answers, the headline number is not enough. But don't let that make you ignore the coin, because the real treasure hunt is still there. A 1,940 Jefferson nickel is a genuine piece of American history. It was struck before the wartime composition change. It carries Felix Schlag's famous Jefferson portrait. It shows Monticello on the reverse. It weighs 5 grams. It has a plain edge. And its missing mint mark isn't a mistake. It's the normal Philadelphia signature for the issue. And here's something collectors understand that casual spenders don't. A coin doesn't need to look spectacular from 5 feet away to deserve attention. Sometimes the important information is hidden under ordinary wear. Sometimes it's in the sharpness of the strike. Sometimes it's in the Monticello steps. Sometimes it's in the surface. Sometimes it's in a tiny variety that almost nobody notices. And sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is simply leave the coin alone until you know exactly what you're looking at. Think about the journey this nickel may have taken. It could have been placed into circulation in 1940. A worker could have received it in change. A shopkeeper could have handled it. A family could have dropped it into a jar. Decades later, somebody could have inherited that jar without knowing what was inside. Then you found it. That is the emotional side of coin collecting. You're not just collecting metal. You're collecting survival. You're collecting history. You're collecting objects that have passed through thousands of hands and somehow remained intact. And when a genuinely exceptional specimen appears at auction, collectors can become extremely competitive. The strongest examples are often the ones people don't want to let go. A collector building a high-quality Jefferson nickel set may spend years searching for the right combination of date, strike, grade, and surface. That's where scarcity becomes powerful. Not simply old, not simply 1940, but old plus authentic plus exceptional plus desirable. That's the combination that can create serious collector demand. Now here's your collector checklist. First, confirm the date. Second, confirm that the coin really has no mint mark. Third, weigh it. Fourth, inspect the diameter and edge. Fifth, study Jefferson's portrait. Sixth, examine Monticello, and especially the steps. Seventh, look for unusual die characteristics or legitimate varieties. And finally, examine the surfaces under good lighting. Don't rush. Don't scrape. Don't polish. Don't let somebody convince you to sell before you've established what you actually have. Patience can protect value. And if the coin is genuinely exceptional, professional grading can provide an independent assessment of authenticity and condition. Now, imagine the difference between two 1,940 Jefferson nickels sitting side by side. One has heavy wear, scratches, damage, and cleaned surfaces. The other has beautiful original surfaces, strong detail, an exceptional strike, and professionally verified characteristics. They may have the same date. They may both have no mint mark. But the market can view them very differently. That's the detail most people miss. The date gets your attention. The condition keeps your attention. The strike makes collectors look closer. And the tiny characteristics may be what ultimately determine whether the coin is ordinary or extraordinary. So if you have a 1940 Jefferson nickel sitting in an old collection, don't throw it back into your change jar. Don't spend it before checking. And above all, do not clean this coin. Put it somewhere safe, handle it by the edges, and investigate before making a decision. Because while the $471,000 figure you've supplied is not supported as the normal market value for an extra fine 1940 Philadelphia nickel, the search for exceptional 1940 Jefferson nickels is absolutely real. Documented sales show that top condition and full steps examples can command meaningful premiums, which is exactly why collectors inspect these coins so closely. This is why an old nickel can be so addictive. You can look at it once and see 5 cents. Look again, and you see 1940. Look closer, and you see Philadelphia. Look even closer, and you start asking about strike quality, full steps, surfaces, varieties, and preservation. And suddenly, that little nickel doesn't feel ordinary anymore. It feels like a mystery. It feels like a survivor. It feels like something worth protecting until you know the truth. So before you spend another old Jefferson nickel, slow down. Check the date. Check the mint mark area. Check the steps. Check the surface. And remember, the coin that looks ordinary may still deserve a second look, but the evidence has to prove the value. And now, get ready for the next one, because the next Jefferson nickel brings another date, another mint story, and another detail that collectors obsess over. If you think this 1940 nickel was interesting, the next coin could make you look at your loose change completely differently.